So initially, I wasn't even going to do a video on this or cover this, but after reading the whole thing and laughing for about 3 minutes straight, I thought you guys might get a kick out of this. So those beacons of tolerance and understanding and acceptance, GLAAD, issued a rather mean-spirited, shall we say, warning to the movie studios about representation in their films, and they've now taken to grading said studios based on their films that they produced this year. And now we're going to look at who got the good grades, who got the bad grades, but far more importantly, stick around. The criteria is what's really going to put things over the top. So right before we dive into that subscribe button, dive into the notification, dive into the like, just do a deep dive. That's all I'm asking. Now, speaking of deep dives, let's go. Once again, the incredibly awesome Bounding Into Comics reports that the annual GLAAD report gives poor grades to every major film studio for, quote, lack of LGBTQ representation in movies. So earlier this year, GLAAD announced that they would start grading studios on their LGBT advocacy as determined by their political donations to left-wing candidates and willingness to censor LGBT scenes in a national markets. Okay, that was the apparent warning. They said, the decision was in response to Disney's entering politics in the old Don't Say Gay bill, blah, blah, blah. And then they were saying, quote, no company that chooses silence over allyship should receive high scores from LGBTQ organizations, while nearly 200 anti-LGBT bills advanced in the states around the country, often targeting transgender youth, said GLAAD CEO and President Sarah Kate Ellis at the time. Corporations need to be held accountable for funding politicians that harm LGBTQ people, including their own employees, and for inaction on legislation that they can help defeat. So, on the one hand, I know that a lot of people like to spout out about how evil corporations are. They're evil. Oh, but they can help. What? Wait a minute. Which is it? Are they evil? Or are they guilty of inaction on legislation they can defeat? Well, let's be honest. They can't defeat legislation. Yes, they can make donations one way or the other, but they're all going to make donations one way. What makes most money for them? That's it. And as for, basically policing their own employees, that's some scary 1984 level stuff. You glad, sure you want to be behind that? Then okay, whatever. So a month later, Ellis further called on Hollywood to take meaningful action in improving quantity, quality, and diversity of LGBTQ depictions in the media, especially in kids and family programming. And again, there's all these stories and all these things about grooming. Don't want to do a deep dive into it, but when you keep bringing it up, people are going to talk. Nonetheless, here we go. Get ready. Dig into this. Quote, I expect every industry executive in this room to join us. GLAAD will give you the playbook, said Ellis at the April 2022 GLAAD Media Awards, but we won't give you a pass. GLAAD will give you the playbook. Do what we say, or we will attempt to punish you. I mean, that's it. They didn't even try to hide it. There's no question that this is intimidation to push forward a certain goal and agenda, whether it is good, bad, indifferent, accepted, majority, minority, it doesn't matter. You are using intimidation to put forth your agenda. Therefore, I'm guessing you shouldn't have any problem with corporations using intimidation against politicians to put forth anti-LGBTQ legislation. You're okay with intimidation, cuts both ways. Nonetheless, we go on because it's gonna get worse. So, despite their attempt at intimidation, thank you, article, GLAAD's latest and 10th annual Studio Responsibility Index reports that all 7 major film studios failed to receive a passing grade based on these new metrics. Let's go. Wait till you hear the metrics. Anyways, so looking at the percentage of LGBTQ characters featured in Hollywood films, from 2021, only 16 of 77 films released by the 7 major studios contain LGBTQ characters. Now, I would really, really like to know what films, because I'm really confident that there were more than 77 films released in 2021. And I know they're not counting indies and everything else, but I'm pretty confident there were. So they handpicked, they cherry-picked. So Sony Pictures, United Artists, Universal, and Walt Disney all received a grade of insufficient, while Warner Brothers received a grade of poor. Meanwhile, Lionsgate and Paramount received the organization's worst score, failing due to their films not containing any LGBTQ characters. Further, after finding zero such representation in Hollywood for the second year in a row, GLAAD also took issue with how LGBTQ characters with a disability and zero living with HIV remains a part of the LGBTQ community that is severely underrepresented. So take this all in. It isn't enough that they're saying you have to have LGBTQ characters in your content, but you must drill that down to such a level that you're now supposed to create and include characters with a disability that are also LGBTQ and living with HIV. If you have a movie where the plot, the story, the most important thing in existence is about someone living with HIV, then you have a character living with HIV. It's that simple. If your plot and story has characters that are LGBTQ, then those characters are LGBTQ. It's that simple. Don't get me wrong. And I'm concerned, maybe in the comments, I am not anti-LGBTQ in the least bit. I'm pro common sense. I'm pro not intimidation. I'm pro quality. So this article and what GLAAD is doing in this is against all of that. And that's the issue. So it isn't just that we're dealing with LGBTQ people. No, it's that we're dealing with an organization that is engaging in some pretty awful tact just to push their message. And let's not sugarcoat it. They're not pushing their message. They don't care about LGBTQ people. They want this out there, press, notoriety, and funding. It's all about. It is always, always, always about the money, right? They could have had this speech to these studio heads behind closed doors, no press release. They could have come up with this list, sent it to the studios, no press release. If they really, truly are interested in pushing forward that would be just as effective calling it out in the media. But doing it this way gets them support, donations, money as a rubric for creating more significant and meaningful LGBTQ content in major studio films. It is named after the GLAAD founder, Vito Russo, and taking inspiration from the infamous, that's a good choice of words, Bechdel test. The test can only be passed if all of the following criteria are met. So here we go. I promised this earlier. Get ready. Buckle up. These are the criteria. And remember, all have to be met. Okay? Criteria 1. The film contains a character that is identifiably lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and or queer. Easy. Slam dunk. Got that. Okay. 2. The character must not be solely or predominantly defined by their sexual orientation or gender identity, i.e., they are comprised of the same sort of unique character traits commonly used to differentiate straight cisgender characters from one another. So what they're basically saying is that it actually has to be a major character. Because I'm sorry, there are tons of background, tertiary, and one-off white, straight, cisgender characters that don't have any unique character traits. They are there to push forth the plot. Okay? There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a background gay, lesbian character who pushes forward the plot. But that's not good enough for them. So now they have to be a major character. All right? They have to have a uniquely identifying trait. Doesn't stop there. The LGBTQ character must be tied to the plot in such a way that the character's removal would have a significant effect, meaning the character is not there to simply provide colorful commentary, paint urban authenticity, or set up a punchline. The character must matter. Not only a major character, the star of the film. That's it. They need to be like a star, co-star. If it's an ensemble, they got to be one of the most key characters. And you look at any film that you could think of, and generally speaking, if it is an ensemble, then you could actually remove most of the characters and it wouldn't kill it. So they really got to be the star. I mean, that's it. It keeps going. The LGBT character's story must not be outwardly offensive, okay? Now, they actually do define offensive, which is important. They define it as avoids defaulting to well-known tropes or stereotypes with no further development. Now, again, tropes and stereotypes is also vague. So your vague definition of something vague is not. In films with multiple LGBTQ characters, at least one character must pass this point for the film to pass the test. So you can't even have like multiple LGBTQ characters in order to pass this stupid test. At least one of them has to be the star of the movie and not, quote, offensive, unquote, without any clear definition of what that must be. So I guess if you made a movie where the star is a flaming homosexual, that would be unacceptable, which doesn't really speak much for what they want. I mean, what exactly do you want? And how are we supposed to as a writer, how are you supposed to write a story where you're not letting the story define the characters, but instead you're having to force one character into a story and craft the story around that character just to meet their goals and their ideas? That is the opposite of how writing should go. And yet, well, if you don't follow this, man, we're going to rat you out. So a couple more quotes just to drive home the lunacy. At a time when the LGBT community is under unprecedented attacks, I believe you've been under unprecedented attacks for going on about 50 years now, if I'm not mistaken, it is more important than ever to hold studios and corporations accountable as businesses remain the most trusted entity in the U.S. Yeah, you might want to do a little research on that one. Businesses are hated in the U.S. They are not trusted. I don't trust Amazon to do the right thing. I don't trust the cable company to lower my rate. I mean, they're hated and despised, and oftentimes justifiably so. But again, this is the lunacy. This new addition to our methodology tracking corporate actions makes it clear that entertainment and media companies need to expand beyond on-screen representation. LGBTQ people deserve to have representation reflected in cinemas around the world, and to know that the people and companies who make and market LGBT inclusive films unequivocally stand up for LGBT folk. The way that they do this, now this isn't in the article, of course, but the implication is the way that they do this is they do exactly what we tell them to do and nothing less. Not only that, but we're going to tell them to do crazy stuff. You saw that list. You saw how impossible it was for anyone to match and fit the criteria on that list unless you have specifically written your film around a character that fits that list. And there you have it. What is ostensibly a good organization, I have said it before, I am not anti-LGBTQ. Period. End of story. I'm going to have to say it a million more times in a million more videos. I know that. But the organization on paper is solid, advocating for a group that had been traditionally not just marginalized, but oppressed. I understand that. Been around the block, seen that happen. But when you go to this wacko extreme, you really embarrass yourselves and you diminish the impact of your message. There are definitely corporations, there are definitely individuals that are like, wow, this might be something worth supporting. I'd like to donate. I'd like to help. And then they see an article like this and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to associate with these whack jobs. I'm all for people bettering themselves and not being ridiculed because of who they are, but I'm not going to demand that everybody match and reach this impossible level of standards just because of what? And they don't have an answer for that. They scream oppression. They've been screaming oppression for 50 years. And the question always is how far are you going to move the goalpost? As soon as you get something, goalpost is moved. And they'll say, well, we're going to have to move the goalpost until we're all equal. Here's a news flash for you. I'm going to wrap it up with this. Everyone is not equal. They never, ever will be. Period. End of story. That's human nature. If you can't accept that, and in the famous words, suck it up, buttercup. But again, this is merely my opinion. What do you guys think? Please let me know in the comment section below.